Thanks for joining us for Raceway Ministries today. In just a moment, we'll be sharing with you the latest in what's going on in the world of Christian ministry and outreach through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. I'd like to welcome everybody to another podcast from Raceway Ministries Today. Raceway Ministries Today is the podcast presentation for the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, and my name is Roger Marsh. I currently serve as the Executive Director for the NFRM, and we have some great opportunities to get on the phone and talk with lots of people who are involved in Raceway Ministries work, and that's what the podcast is all about. If you need to know more information about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, you can get on the internet and find us at racewayministries.org, or we have several different Facebook pages that you can check out. One of them is simply labeled National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Another one is Raceway Ministries at the Short Track, and then we have a new Facebook page called Gateway Racing Ministries. And of course, there are many other Facebook pages that are presented by many of our Raceway Ministry teams, and you can look them up for sure. Well, we're glad to have you on the podcast today, and it's my pleasure to welcome to our podcast today Tim Bozarth. We have interviewed Tim before. In fact, I looked at my calendar. It was about a year ago that we actually talked to Tim on an interview for the podcast. Tim resides in St. Louis, Missouri. Been involved in Raceway Ministries work for a long time. He's been involved in Chaplain work, Raceway Ministries work for the past couple of decades, both at the short tracks and having done some work at Gateway International over there in St. Louis. Tim is a very faithful church member. In fact, he was telling me as I picked up the phone and called him today that he was in a 4-hour meeting at his local church, Parkway Baptist Church in St. Louis, where he serves as a deacon and has provided some great leadership for them in the interim while they've been without a pastor. Relative to what we do in Raceway Ministries work, Tim serves as chaplain for several different short tracks in the St. Louis area. Among them, one would be Tri-City Speedway over in Granite City, Illinois, and then also he serves over in Peevely, Missouri as chaplain at the Federated Auto Parts Speedway at I-55. And so he had some great experience with short track ministry. This year, though, has found Tim quite busy with another project that I've been involved with along with him, building a new group that is called Gateway Racing Ministries. I previously mentioned the Facebook page that they have now. This is a brand new effort to try to put together some ongoing ministry at World Wide Technology Raceway. We had some folks from Windy City Raceway Ministries and a couple of other locations come and help us do some work at the NASCAR event there back in May and June of this year, and Tim was right in the middle of all that. And so as we continue to try to launch that, Tim is going to be involved in providing some initial leadership, and so we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a moment or two. But meanwhile, Tim, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those nice words of introduction.
Well, you're welcome, Tim, and they are certainly well deserved. You've had a lot of good experience, and I've been alongside you doing some ministry there in the St. Louis area. Very impressed with all the experience that you have in there and the effectiveness of the work that you've done at some of those short tracks and around the old Gateway International Raceway. And really appreciate you, Tim, simply because you have a heart for the local church and you believe very strongly in basing your ministry out of the local church and being a part of a local church, and you're right in the middle of a lot of busy things there at Parkway Baptist Church in St. Louis. Trust that all that's going well.
Yes, it is. As you mentioned, we are currently without a pastor, and I serve as chairman of our deacons at our church, and hence that puts me in the middle of a lot of the activities that are taking place now as we go through doing evaluations of our church in preparation for, actually, at the beginning of this month, we started to request resumes to be submitted. So we expect to see that over the next few months, and of course that activity will stretch out into 2023. So it's a busy time, but if we're not busy for the Lord, then we're not busy for the right reasons, right?
Hey, you got that right. And I got to tell you, as a guy that's been involved in pastoral work for most of my ministry career, I really appreciate the thorough approach that you and the folks there at Parkway are taking as you search for a pastor. Very important decision, and obviously it's got to be God-led, and God will be right in the middle of it all, but I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing to make sure you get it right. Now, you're busy with your church, obviously, and you also have a full-time job. If I'm not mistaken, I recall you told me you're aerospace engineer, I believe.
Yeah, avionics engineer.
Yeah, thank you. And that keeps you busy full-time, but somehow you find time to get out there at the short tracks and be thoroughly involved in doing ministry there, and then also getting this new thing started there with Gateway Racing Ministries there at World Wide Technology. You have had a busy year, no doubt about it. And of course, we're winding down and getting down to the last few weekends of most of the racing. But in a few sentences, sum up your year of Raceway Ministries work in 2022. What's it been like?
Well, it started off a lot of rain out, but a lot of planning, building relationships.
Good. Okay.
And even through some of the rainouts, opens up opportunities for me to hit tracks that I don't normally have an opportunity to get to. So, a lot of evenings that I would be able to set at home because we don't have a race at local track. I was able to find another track in the region that just as many drivers would do. Go try to find the race.
Yeah.
I was able to find those tracks. And, that's the opportunity to build relationships with promoters, with the owners of these tracks. As you and I have talked in the past, getting into these tracks is not the hard thing. Most promoters welcome a chaplain to come on once they understand what we're there to do.
Right.
And it is finding individuals that are willing to serve in those areas. So, building the relationship with the promoter so that when an opportunity of an individual comes along, I've got a place to plug them into them.
I love what you're saying there, Tim, and it's a great point to make. Some of the folks listening to our podcast may be trying to pick up tidbits of information about how to be effective as a raceway chaplain and that kind of thing. And what you just described, I think, is very important. A lot of people probably would feel just content to stay at home on a rainout night. If you got rain that's caused one raceway to cancel out their schedule for the evening and you're the chaplain there, man, what a great opportunity to go home and kick up your heels and just kind of relax for the evening. But there's opportunity there. There's a lot of opportunity there. There may be another track in the local area that you have some relationships with the manager and so forth, and to go out there and maybe hang out with them or just touch base with them or go and be at their race event if they're not rained out that night just provides an open door of opportunity to continue this pursuit of trying to get chaplain ministry at all the different speedways. And I think your perseverance and your passion and your dedication and commitment to that is going to pay off some big dividends on down the way, because if I recall, you've told me there are at least 8 or 10 short tracks around that area that need chaplains, and chaplains have been hard to come by.
Oh, absolutely. I forgot the exact number now, but it's probably on the order of 15 plus tracks that I could be at that within the 2.5 hours of my home right here.
Wow.
So, yeah, there's lots of opportunities.
Well, I really appreciate your perseverance there in trying to keep those doors of opportunity open. One of my prayers is, as we continue to try to build Gateway Racing Ministries, is that we're going to find some people that will step up and say, hey, I want to be a chaplain at one of those short tracks. So I really appreciate you keeping those doors open through your persistence and your perseverance in your work. Well, let's divide our conversation into 3 different segments tonight. We've already overlapped a little bit with the 3 different ideas that I want to talk about. I want to talk about your year at the short tracks in the St. Louis area, and then I'd like to talk about the project that we have of trying to build up a group for work at World Wide Technology Raceway. And then finally, I want you to describe for our listeners the role that you're going to have at a huge upcoming event in the St. Louis area in December. And I know you're excited about that because I've heard the tone of your voice whenever you've been able to talk to me about that. But let's begin with your work at the short tracks there in the St. Louis area, primarily, of course, Tri-City and Federated, even though you have had opportunity to get out to other speedways throughout the year. But let's kind of go in this direction. Before we get into all the details of what your work has been this year, I'd like to find out, first of all, how has 2022 compared to the 2 previous years? We seem to have sort of emerged from the COVID pandemic and things seem to be settled down for the most part. So What's it been like to jump back into full schedules, full crowds, full car counts? How's that compare to the previous years? And has anything changed in the way that you do ministry at the short tracks as a result of that interruption that we've had?
Actually, we were really blessed in this area. One of the tracks, Highland, had some issues that they had to deal with back in 2020.
Okay.
And we also had another track that basically never came back from COVID. It never was able to reopen.
Oh, wow.
But other than that, 2020, other than the delay of the start of the year, really wasn't much of an impact. And in fact, if you talk to some of the promoters, they actually had a real good year that year because nobody else was able to have any kind of audience sitting in their seats.
Okay.
I-55, Peebly, was actually the first racetrack in the country that had an audience there to witness a race.
Wow.
And that was televised. The World of Outlaw sprint cars came in and, basically got permission to run that race with an audience. And so that was the first one that actually had an audience associated with it. And we really have been really good all along. Now, the one area that has been impacted this year where has opened back up has actually been hospitals.
Okay.
The hospital ministries, where when I hear of individuals being, sick or in accidents or whatever the case may be, not necessarily on track, but even, street accidents, I'm able to get to the hospital to go visit them.
Okay. Yeah.
Actually be able to get in there. And that just opened up this year. So it's really the off track that has been probably the thing that has opened up more than anything else. And so we've been blessed here in this area that the COVID regulations really didn't shut us down completely.
I'm very grateful along with you that, things weren't negatively impacted by the pandemic at the short tracks where you work. Good for them. That's awesome that they were able to continue to provide great entertainment for the fans, a racing venue for the racers and the teams to get there and do their thing. That's incredible. Now, regarding this year, you kind of described that life goes on. 2020 wasn't that bad. 2021, don't know how that impacted your ministry, but now we get into 2022. What's been the most effective parts of your ministry at, say, Tri-City and Federated I-55 during the year 2022?
Sometimes you definitely kind of wonder whether or not you're being effective. Yeah. And you're there week in and week out. And, honestly, I don't see a lot of people come into the Lord, which is your ultimate goal, even in a ministry type work activity.
Sure.
But that being said, when individuals pull you to the side and they've got something that they're dealing with within their own life and they want prayer and guidance, you're effective because you're a presence there for the Lord.
Absolutely.
When individuals stop you and don't just say something, you did nice prayer during the invocation, but actually bring up a point or two that you'd made. And one of the things that I tried to do in every invocation is to try to point out some attribute or some thought of God of who He really is to us. And when individuals respond back to me and parrot back something that I had said in an invocation, you're being effective.
Oh, yeah.
And so those are probably the areas where I see that I'm being affected. I'm seeing individuals that are responding to my presence there.
Sure. And I've said this for years, and you've just affirmed it in my heart and in my mind. One of the biggest reasons why I believe we need to be there is to have a presence and to represent what God has to offer to people. And if we're not there, we can't do that. I had somebody the other day ask me, why in the world do you guys go out to the raceway and do what you do? Is it really effective? I said, let me tell you why we go and do what we do. We go and we do what we do because of the latest drive-by shooting in your city. We go and we do what we do because of the mass shooting at the school in Uvalde and other places. We go and do what we do because of the divorce rates and the broken families and all the things that are broken in our culture and all the things that are broken in the lives of the people in our culture. And the reason we go there is you can't do anything about those things if you're not there for the people. And the people are at the raceway. So if you go to the raceway and you're representing God and the answers that He has to offer, you're there making a difference in our culture. You're making a difference in our world. You're light in the middle of darkness. And I love what you just described because it could be just a phrase in your invocation that opens the door widely for some racer to grab you by the arm in the pits and say, can we talk for a minute or two, And so I think, what you've described is just our presence, our availability. We're not going to rack up mass evangelism statistics out there at the Speedway. We've had some great fruit. I talked to somebody at Charlotte Raceway Ministries the other day, and they were telling me about people that got saved at Charlotte Motor Speedway and their ministry out in the campground this year, and praise God for that.
Yep.
But ours is primarily a seed sowing ministry and a presence.
Absolutely.
And so I think what you've described is absolutely accurate. Now, we may have some aspiring chaplains out there in the listening world taking in our podcast today, or we may have some new chaplains that are brand new at this, listening and just wondering, what do I do? How do I get a handle on this ministry called Chaplain Ministry at the Speedway? What are some tips that I can pick up on? So what are some of the biggest challenges that you face out there at the short tracks where you go, and how do you navigate your way through them and still keep your head high and your shoulders back and remain strong and faithful? Because I know the challenges are there. So how do you face them? How do you deal with them?
One of the biggest challenges that anybody would face in this would be that you're going to be tested. Individuals that are in the pit, they'll want to take an opportunity to test you, to see if you are truly going to, live out what you're trying to preach. Okay.
Yes.
And, some of those individuals will just basically come out and say it. Others will do it in a much more nonchalant way. On the other hand, you'll have other individuals that live that life, and when you're around, they will immediately stop talking that way, or whatever the case may be, because out of respect. And
Right.
It's an interesting environment to be in. For a non-pastor, I think there are a couple additional challenges that you see. One of which is just the plain and simple public speaking. If you're not used to being in front of individuals and doing that invocation, standing up in front of just even a few hundred people versus a couple thousand.
Even at a driver's meeting.
Absolutely, at a driver's meeting. It can be a little bit on the daunting task if you're not used to being in front of individuals and conducting that kind of a prayer.
Sure.
The other side of that coin, too, is the recognition that people give you. And, I'm a deacon. I'm not a pastor.
Right.
I haven't been called to become a pastor. But the fact is that to a lot of individuals, I am their pastor. I'm the closest thing that they have to a pastor, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
When I first started being involved in Raceway Ministries, I constantly was trying to correct people. I have stopped doing that.
Yeah.
If they want to call me pastor, I just let them call me pastor.
Sure. Oh, yeah, sure.
I ask any of the announcers to refer to me as either chaplain or a minister, but other than that, in general conversations, I let people just refer to me however they want to.
Sure.
And honestly, that was a challenge that took me a while to get over, to be honest with you.
Well, I can understand that for sure. You step into that role and it's kind of new, especially if you're not accustomed to being involved in church work, like on staff or as a pastor. All of a sudden, you have a title, and all of a sudden you have a responsibility. All of a sudden you have respect from people, and all of a sudden you're a target for their criticism all at the same time. And if you're not prepared for that, it can really catch you off guard.
Absolutely.
And the other thing that I would add to that is, if you're not accustomed to being around professional people, the manager and the owners of Tri-City or Federated, I-55, and these are people that have reputations, and these are people that have attained levels of success, and all of a sudden you're thrust into the middle of their environment, and if you get called upon to lead a devotional at a meeting or say a prayer at a meeting, it can be pretty intimidating.
Yeah.
So that's great advice that you give for a new guy that's stepping into that role. All of a sudden you just got to be ready for all that sort of thing. Now, what about other pieces of advice for short track chaplains? If you could narrow it down to 2 or 3 important pieces of advice, what would you say to them?
I think first of all is, and this is something I speak to anybody that I'm involved with, trying to get involved with ministry, and that is that commitment both on and off the track.
Yes.
You've got to be there regularly at the track, and I ask for a 2-year commitment.
Yeah.
And for every night that particular track races, that you're going to be there, barring vacations. I understand things like that, but
yeah, sure.
But you're going to be there off the track, being available for people, hospital visits and such, things that aren't taking place at the track. And it's amazing how big of an impact that is to people. I've got people, that when I first got involved in Raceway Ministries, I went to the hospital, and some of those individuals to this day immediately flock to me when they see me because of that visit, that time that I took out of my time to go and visit them in their time of need.
Yeah, that says a lot.
Yeah. I would also suggest that don't be discouraged because of the lack of harvest.
Mm-hmm.
We plant the seeds, and honestly, I am more thrilled with the idea that a harvest is accomplished by some local church than I am that a harvest would be conducted by me.
Oh, great point.
Because that church is what's going to be able to provide the feeding of that individual far more than what I would be able to.
Boy, what a great point. Yeah.
The point is that I'm there just to sow seeds and hope that others come along to reap that harvest.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is the last item, build relationships.
Yeah.
If you're new to a track, start to build relationship with that promoter if you can. Find some official or two, start to build a relationship there. Find a driver or two that that is going to be showing up regularly, and make a core of just a few individuals and then start building from there, and just start to develop those relationships. Over time, those relationships will blossom to the entire pit area and staff of the track. But ultimately, you don't get there overnight. It takes time to work those individual relationships, and don't be discouraged. Just work on one or two relationships at a time.
Yeah.
And build the numbers over time.
That's good advice, Tim. That's great advice. And I would have to say that you're very qualified to give that advice, because I recall back in the summer when I was out at Tri-City with you for one night of racing there, I was amazed as we walked through the pits and as we walked amongst the fans and then went in the infield for you to do the invocation. You were around the staff and the announcer and all that sort of stuff there. I could tell these people knew who you were. They respected who you were. They gravitated toward you. And I know that didn't happen overnight, because you've been out there at Tri-City for a long time, and you have to invest in time spent, conversations, and it takes a while to build those relationships, but it can happen. And I think the most important thing you mentioned is don't give up. You just got to be patient, and it's got to develop in somewhat of a natural way too. You can't force it too much. I really appreciate the relationships that you have built there at Tri-City, and I'm confident that they're the same at I-55. Well, great pieces of advice for people that are aspiring perhaps to be short track chaplains. Now, I want to shift gears before too much time gets away and talk a little bit about Gateway Racing Ministries and the potential that we have there at World Wide Technology Raceway. Just for our listeners, for background, we began to pursue some things at World Wide Technology Raceway, I guess it was last year. And most of the initial pursuit was on the part of Glenn Spoolstra, and it was through a network of contacts. It was kind of interesting how it turned out. The folks at World Wide Technology had connections with some people in the NASCAR world that were connected with Chicagoland Speedway years ago, and those relationships filtered down to Glenn Spoolstra, and then Glenn was able to connect with the staff at World Wide Technology, and we began conversations about ministry there for their NASCAR events, since this year was the first year they've had the NASCAR Cup Series there. And so with the help of many people, we ultimately were able to get our foot in the door and actually serve as campground hosts for the NASCAR event back in May. I think it was the last weekend of May, first weekend of June, something like that.
1st of June.
Okay, all right, 1st of June. And you were right there in the middle of all of it. Came out there, and I guess there were maybe 6 or 8 or 10 of us that throughout the weekend we welcomed people to the campground, helped them find their camping spots, and then we kind of spent the weekend hanging out with them and did music concerts and some golf cart rides and had church service for them there on Sunday morning. And the prospects for the future based on that seem to be very good. I've had a couple of conversations, corresponded by email with staff up there at World Wide Technology Raceway, and they are quite eager to have us back, and they want us to host their campgrounds and do some other things, not just for the NASCAR weekend, but for the IndyCar weekend and NHRA as well. So the prospects look pretty good there. Right now, we currently are involved in trying to recruit volunteers. And Tim, I got to tell you, I appreciate your contact so much with Darren Casper and the St. Louis Metro Baptist Association. And of course, our meeting there launched another opportunity to meet with the Metro East Baptist Association. And so we've been at both of those meetings and have been able to have a presence there, kind of share what we do. And based on that, we have all these contacts that I'm sending letters to try to get churches involved. And so, first of all, I really appreciate your involvement in that, and I appreciate you stepping up and offering the initial leadership. One of the most enjoyable things I've had in the midst of all that was a great barbecue dinner at Bandana's there in St. Louis. So, thank you for pointing me to some good barbecue there in St. Louis. Yeah. But,
well, we know how to do some barbecue around here, believe it or not.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, and I got to tell you, even though that was, like a chain barbecue place, we have Dickey's here in Texas and other chains as well. But, man, Bandana's was good. That was good stuff. Share some of your observations, thoughts, and feelings, hopes and dreams for Gateway Racing Ministries there at World Wide Technology. What would you say about it from your viewpoint?
To start off with, it starts off with the track and the willingness of the track to have us even out there.
Yeah.
And, it's amazing to me that this facility is, it's more than prime. They are greatly desiring our presence out there.
Yeah.
They want us to come along beside them and help them accomplish an entertainment for their fans.
Yeah.
Ultimately that's what they're in business for, is to provide entertainment. And, Gateway's World Wide Technology, is really stepping up. They did some tremendous job this year at the Cup race, tying the city of St. Louis into the track, which
it was incredible what they did to promote that thing. Wow.
If you're actually on the track, as you come around turn 3, you can see the Gateway art from the track itself, but if you're on the track.
Yeah.
So it's that is how close we are. The track is to the city. So it's interesting how they are wanting to really bring us on board to help them out. I think we did a tremendous job, Glenn and his crew, as well as others, showing what we can do in the campground area, to the point where they are really desiring us to almost take over their campgrounds for them. And not just the biggest one, which is what we were in charge of, but all of them.
Right.
And then also opening up other doors for us as well. So really, at this stage, it's amazing, because what we need is workers.
Yep.
Which is not an uncommon scenario, I realize. But the issue is that we don't even really have a good organization, and that's what we're trying to work on right now, is trying to develop that organization. And you mentioned these 2 meetings that we went to. We've got several names of individuals that had some level of interest, and then, of course, a number of churches in the region. And so we're going to try to have a organizational meeting November the 12th,
right,
from 10 o'clock to noon at Parkway Baptist Church here in St. Louis.
Yep.
And try to start pulling everybody together, get their level of interest, and understand their willingness to serve, and hopefully come out of that with an actual organization. And I would love to be a little Indian at the end of the day, just helping out where I can.
Yeah.
And seeing others being the drivers of the organization.
Gotcha. Well, we've got some people that currently are committed to being a part of the leadership team for that group. Mm-hmm. Mark and Karen Doan from there in Illinois. Mark's leader of the Revved Up band that played the concerts and did the worship service out there on NASCAR weekend. And Karen is very capable in producing video type stuff, and they've indicated that they would be interested in being a part of the leadership team. We have a couple of others as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping that as a result of our November the 12th meeting, and by the way, I already have feedback from one gentleman that we met at one of the churches in our previous meetings, who said that he plans to be at the meeting, and he actually serves as a law enforcement chaplain. So I think it'll be very, very good to have him on board. But, we're hoping to gather enough volunteers to be able to staff whatever it is the World Wide Technology people want us to do at their Speedway, and then also have emerge in the midst of that some people that'll step up on and be a part of the leadership team. And I don't want you on the sidelines, okay? I mean... the way you were talking a few minutes ago there, you're ready to be a fly on the wall and just watch what happens. We need some of your expertise in the middle of all that. But I hope that we can gather a good leadership team, get this thing going really, really well. And we've got time. We've got a little bit of time once we get into the new year. Once we get past the November 12th meeting, hopefully we'll have time to get with the Raceway, find out exactly what it is they want us to do out there on their property, and then have a couple of other orientation training type meetings and get everybody ready to go. But I'm very excited about it, Tim, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Glenn Spoolstra, Michael White, Carol Spoolstra, Kent, Mark, Karen, many of the others who were there in June to help us get this thing going. Can't say thank you enough to the whole group, but thank you for your part.
I think, the individuals from Chicago coming down and just really showing the track what we can do really was a great impression upon them, to the point where I think it has really opened up some major doors.
I would agree with you, Tim. You hit the nail on the head. We would not have the open door of opportunity there if it had not been for the Chicagoland group coming.
Yep.
And like you said, just showing off what can be done.
Yep.
They did a phenomenal job, and my hat's off to them. Well, again, before we run out of time, I've got to talk to you about this December event that's coming up, because I got to tell you, when I talked with you about this event coming up there in the St. Louis area a few months ago on the phone, I just about jumped out of my chair with excitement just because you were so excited about it. So if you want to, take a few minutes and talk about what's coming up in St. Louis in December that you're going to be able to have a part of. I always thought the Chili Bowl was exciting, but man, what you've described here, it rivals the Chili Bowl in a big way. So tell us what's going on in December in St. Louis and your part in it.
So this will be the, I forgot now, 5th or 6th running of the Gateway Dirt Nationals.
Okay.
And we used to have this football team here in St. Louis that decided to move themselves back out to L.A. We won't talk about the name of them, but anyway, that left a large hole in the city. And when I say hole in the city, I'm talking about a dome in downtown St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
And so a gentleman named Cody Summers, promoter, that came in and decided he was going to do something completely different, and that was to have full-size stock car racing inside.
Well, it's amazing.
And so they referred to it as Dirt in December. This year it's December 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And they build a 1/5 of a mile bull ring inside the dome at the America Center, downtown St. Louis. Guys come in from all over the country. Some of the top name and late models and modified drivers will be there. We're talking about like Scott Bloomquist and some of the other big names.
Big guys. Wow.
And dirt racing will be there for 3 nights. They have this, big event, and they'll have 15 to 20,000 fans in the stands, and they'll have who knows how many pay-per-view as well. And so it's a big event, and I refer to it as one of the biggest spectacles in racing.
Yeah.
I won't call it the best racing in the world, but it is just, it's WWE meets auto racing. And it's an interesting event. But when it was first announced years ago, I got a hold of Cody Summers and spoke with him about being the chaplain for the event. And I've been blessed to be able to serve as chaplain for the event every year.
Wow.
I don't get an opportunity to spend a lot of time with the drivers because they have limited time even in the building.
Yeah, sure.
And but I do have an opportunity to spend a good amount of time with the staff that are associated with this. And there's, I don't know how many, 50, 75, 100 individuals that are just staff for this thing. That he brings in from all over the country. And so I'm able to spend time with the staff, and I spend a lot of time there. And of course, your typical things that a chaplain does during the race event, from the invocation to also following up when individuals have had bad accidents, and they're released from the ambulance, but they still may be shaken up or whatever the case may be. So, you still are able to do the typical things that you do as chaplain, but it's a different event altogether, that's for sure.
Well, I got to tell you, you had mentioned it to me before, and we talked about it a little bit, and I thought, yeah. And then you pointed me to some promotional videos for the event. I don't know if they were on YouTube or, special link to their website or whatever they were. But I got to tell you, when I watched those videos, I remember just looking at my computer screen saying, Tim wasn't kidding. Man, this is electric. This is huge. So if our listeners wanted to check out the event, what's the best way to get them pumped and excited and praying for you as the event approaches? Where can they go to catch on to the excitement that you have?
Honestly, I send them to the website of the Gateway Dirt National website.
Gateway Dirt National.
Yeah, Gateway Dirt Nationals, and just do a search for that, and that'll come up. If you want to see what some of the excitement is about. Now, I will caution, in some of the videos that are on YouTube, there's some language going on.
Oh, I'm sure.
But there's definitely several videos on YouTube of the, shall we say, the excitement of the drivers.
Yeah, well, I recall some of the videos that you pointed me to were like chronicling the rivalry between two potential champions of the event. And man, they were getting after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was great. It was fantastic.
Like I said, it's kind of like WWE Youth Auto Race.
Yeah.
Even down to their introductions on Saturday night. The lights go out in the building. There's a spotlight for the opening ceremonies, for the invocation and the national anthem. And then they go over to pyros and everything else to introduce driver by driver coming out of the tunnel.
Yeah.
So it's a different event altogether.
Wow. Sounds like fun, man. I wish my first weekend of December was open. I'd love to come watch and be a part of it and see you at work out there. I tell you, Tim, I appreciate you so much, and it's always a lot of fun to visit with you and be around you. So thank you so much. I know there's plenty of other things that we could talk about as we think about not only the experiences that you've had this year, but what we're looking forward to in the year to come. So what you got coming up for next year, 2023? What's it look like for you?
Basically more of the same. We got the Tri-City, I-55, of course, Gateway, and then when I have an opportunity, hitting some of the other tracks in the area. So this year, it'll probably total out to about 45 or 50 events. I've still got 2 at Tri-City that we still have yet to do, and then the 3 nights at Gateway Dirt Nationals.
Yep.
So I'll probably hit somewhere around 45 to 50 nights in total, and that was with a lot of rainouts that we've had this year.
Wow. Well, maybe after December 2nd and 3rd, you can sleep in a day or two, catch up on a little bit of rest. Well, Tim, thank you so much for taking the time to visit tonight. Can't wait to edit the podcast and get it up for everybody to listen to. For our listeners, we've been talking with Tim Bozarth. Tim is in the St. Louis area, serves as chaplain at Tri-City Speedway over in Granite City there in the St. Louis area. Also chaplain at Federated Auto Parts Speedway at I-55 over in Peevely, and has his hands in a lot of other short track ministry around the St. Louis area, not to mention all the other things that he has going on. And Tim is also helping us head up Gateway Racing Ministries so that we can continue to walk through open doors of opportunity there at World Wide Technology in the year to come. And so, Tim, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, for all of our listeners, this has been another edition of Raceway Ministries Today. We've been visiting with Tim Bozarth, and I'm sure we'll have opportunity to visit with him in future podcasts on down the way. But if you need more information about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, be sure and go to our website, racewayministries.org, or you can find us on our Facebook pages, National Fellowship of Raceway Ministry, Raceway Ministry at the Short Tracks, or Gateway Racing Ministry. Until our next podcast, we wish everybody well. And as we all know, as we travel through the road course of life, if we've trusted the Lord Jesus as our personal Savior, we always have Him with us by virtue of the presence of His Holy Spirit. We have the guidance of His Word, and we're grateful for that. So wish everybody the best, and we'll look forward to next time here on Raceway Ministries Today. We hope you'll tune in next time as we continue to explore Christian ministry and outreach in motorsports through the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. If you'd like to learn more about the National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries, visit our website at racewayministries.org. Follow us on Facebook under the name National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries. Check out our podcast and videos found on our National Fellowship of Raceway Ministries YouTube channel. Meanwhile, thanks for joining us for this presentation of Raceway Ministries Today.